This week, emergency rescue teams gathered at the Sheikh Radwan clinic in western Gaza City to dig up dozens of bodies that had been hastily buried in the clinic's courtyard amid Israel's genocidal assault. So, this is part of a broader pattern following the so called ceasefire that went into effect last month and the partial withdrawal of Israeli troops. Palestinians across Gaza have been working to try and exhume thousands of bodies from under the rubble and from temporary mass graves in an effort to identify them and to give them a proper burial. There were believed to be up to 80 bodies buried in the courtyard of the Sheikh Radwan clinic alone. And this was because as Israeli troops pushed deeper and deeper into Gaza, into places like the Jabalia refugee camp, for example, they were conducting scorched earth attacks and issuing mass displacement orders. And so when people were killed, their relatives or friends were unable to bury them where they were. And they carried them instead to the courtyard of the Sheikh Radwan clinic to bury them in what essentially became a mass shallow grave. So this week, civil defense teams set to work to retrieve these bodies, and they were using nothing more than shovels, hose, and their bare hands. A civil defense worker told us how difficult this work is, that they need desperately excavators, bulldozers, proper equipment. But the Israelis have not allowed these things into Gaza in any substantial way. The Sheikh Radwan clinic itself has been partially destroyed. You can see one side of the building smashed in. The courtyard is surrounded by destroyed buildings, slabs of concrete, pancaked roofs. This is what all of Gaza's landscape has been turned into. Civil defense teams were digging up the bodies. Many of them were wrapped in white body bags and they were buried just a few feet into the dirt. Um, they also dug up, other remains, the bones and pieces of decomposed flesh mixed in with torn clothes, and tried to place those in small piles. And one worker was kind of going around the body bags, marking the date of recovery and writing on the body bags the words "unknown identity." By Wednesday, 51 bodies had been recovered, and the work is still ongoing by civil defense. These bodies were then taken to Al Shifa Hospital for the difficult and often unsuccessful work of identifying them. More than 10,000 Palestinians are estimated to be buried under the rubble across Gaza. And the task of retrieving them and identifying them is almost insurmountable. Since the ceasefire went into effect last month on October 10th, over 530 bodies have been recovered, according to Gaza's Ministry of Health. Forensic experts in Gaza are struggling to confirm the identities of people due to a shortage of DNA testing kits and other equipment that Israel does not allow into Gaza. So, over the past month, we've seen Palestinians being forced to look at harrowing photos of the remains of bodies, either recovered under the rubble or returned by Israel as part of the exchange of captives in an effort to try and identify their missing loved ones. And this was the case at the Sheikh Radwan clinic, where people gathered around fathers, mothers, siblings, friends, desperately hoping that they would locate the missing body of a loved one as they were being exhumed. We spoke to Fadl Ahmed, whose son Muhammad was killed in an Israeli airstrike on a school in the Jabalia refugee camp in July. Israeli forces had surrounded the camp and issued displacement orders to residents, so he could not bury his son in Jabalia, as his son had previously expressed if he had been killed, he wanted him to be buried there. So Fadl carried his body to the Sheikh Radwan clinic to bury him in the courtyard. And he came this week hoping to find his son's body as it was being exhumed. The Israelis had bulldozed the area, and he said he wanted to have a place for his Muhammad's children to be able to visit their father. And he said, since the ceasefire began, we've been in the first stage, still looking for our children. And this is the plight of tens of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza, whose relatives or friends or loved ones are missing and buried somewhere in the tens of millions of tons of rubble and concrete that cover the entirety of Gaza. Another man, Majid Ibrahim al Bozum, also came to the Sheikh Radwan clinic as civil defense teams were digging up the bodies. And this was an even more desperate attempt to find his brother, who had been missing since September 17th. Majid does not know if his brother is alive, if he's dead, if he's been imprisoned. He heard that bodies were being exhumed, and so he came trying to see if any of them was his brother. And you can often see Palestinians opening up body bags and peering inside in a desperate attempt to try and locate their loved ones who have gone missing or were killed and they don't know where their bodies are. And this is the hellish nightmare that Palestinians in Gaza are living more than 2 years into this genocide.